All right, Cherie, welcome back to the Resource Insider podcast. I'm trying to remember, when was the last time you were here?
I think it was late last year. We're just getting
Yeah.
started.
We were in the height of COVID at that point. We did this via Zoom call. You were in Nevada at the time. So welcome to the office. Welcome to our studios. It's good to finally have you in here and spend some time in person.
Thank you, Jamie.
So where should we start? I wanted to have you in here. I wanted to do an update on Gold Bull, which I'm an investor in. Can you kind of give people the 30,000 foot view of what Gold Bull is, what you guys are actively trying to do down there in Nevada, for those who haven't heard of you before?
Sure, we're a Nevada-focused gold exploration company, also interested in mergers and acquisitions. Basically started Gold Bull as a roll-up vehicle to put in excellent resource assets that we think have a lot more room to grow, and also greenfields exploration assets where a few holes is either going to find a winner or you're going to know if you've got a loser. So it's a high impact kind of exploration company.
And now you wouldn't call that a prospect generator though, right? Because some people might confuse that with that kind of picking up a series of assets. You're self-funding all the exploration at this point.
We are, yeah. I wouldn't call us a project generator, more a resource accumulator and a resource grower.
Yeah. So you don't sound like someone from Nevada, typically. How did you end up in Nevada and focused on gold there?
I accidentally fell into Nevada through the battery minerals space.
Okay.
I was going back and forth speaking to a battery and vehicle manufacturing company that's based there. So initially, that was almost 10 years ago. What drew me there was more battery minerals, and I relocated there about 7 years ago. And then the gold exploration potential was just astounding. The fact that this majority of the state is undercover and unexplored, and the minority of the state that is outcropping has world-class gold deposits in it. So
yeah,
initially I just thought, I can't believe that there's a lack of exploration undercover here, and saw a massive opportunity. Given my WA background, Western Australian background, we didn't really have a choice but to explore for deposits undercover, yet Nevada have been very lucky to find so much outcropping. So for us, it's all about the undercover opportunity in the state.
And I think we talked about this a little bit the last time you were on, but I mean, the general premise is, you see this a lot in North America, the Canadian Shield, Nevada. There's a lot of bedrock kind of just poking out of the ground, which makes it pretty easy for geologists to come and, hit it with a hammer and take a sample. Whilst in Western Australia, all that rock is covered by sediments, by soil. And so you're actively drilling to do that. Now, we were talking about a year ago, you've acquired assets, you've explored assets. How has that premise kind of worked out over the last year?
I think we've proven our technology works, and it's a bit of an Australian invasion in Gold Bull. We're led by an Australian management team. David Johnson, our VP of Exploration, is a geophysicist. Regina Malloy relocated from Africa. She's actually Australian as well, but she relocated from Africa to be our exploration manager based in Nevada. And we're not driven by models, we're driven by the gold anomalies, and we're exploring undercover more so than the outcrop. We're using geophysics a lot more than your average company. We're using some geochemistry that is a little bit outside the box. So it's called lag sampling, basically scraping up the crumbs that you find on top of sand dunes and transported material, and using special lab techniques to work out exactly what's in those rocks. And if it correlates with the geophysics, then we start thinking we've got targets. And we've started off at our known deposit. So we've started off at Sandman, where we know there is gold undercover. And then we've deployed our IP geophysics and our geochem and basically use that as orientation surveys to make sure it works. If it doesn't work where you know there's gold, then you've got no chance of exploring for it undercover. But we've proven that works there, and then we've taken it further afield and surveyed underneath the sand elsewhere at Sandman.
So this is lag sampling, L-A-G?
Yes.
Is this in any way similar to BLEG sampling? I think B-L-E-G?
It is similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you work for Newmont for some time?
I did not work for Newmont. My closest synergy would be Rio Tinto. Half of Newmont's ex-Rio Tinto these days.
Yeah, so a couple of my friends spent years at Newmont, and they're like BLEG sampling like zealots. Essentially, they are a big believer in that, and they said Newmont's used this technique all over the world to find massive deposits. I think this is kind of interesting for people at home. And for me personally, actually, because I know what BLEG sampling is. What is leg sampling? How does that differentiate?
We're essentially looking for parts per billion anomalies instead of parts per million. And you have to really know what you're looking for there and have to know the terrain and combine that with your other science like geophysics and like structure. And then when you work out that, you've got to work out where those little pieces of rocks, those crumbs were transported from. So then topography comes into play, if it's a flat area, if it's a hilly area, if it's gone down a river. So you build all these, they're basically building a puzzle and putting in all these scientific inputs to get to the bottom of the source of that gold mineralization. So the lag sampling, the geochemical techniques of the lab is more accurate or at a higher detection limit than your standard rock chip samples would be, for example.
Okay, and so you're able to sort of use those as little sort of pinpricks on a map to sort of trace back to where a deposit might be?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what the dot to dots you do as a kid. It's like that.
Yeah,
you're getting like all these additional vectors, and we're looking for vectors for drill holes, basically.
And so tell me if I've still got this right, but when I invested, sort of your star asset was the Sandman Project, which you did a deal on to get with from Newmont. Where are you guys on that now?
So since we last caught up, we've increased the resource at Sandman from 309,000 ounces to 494,000 ounces. So the resource grew by 60% and it's still growing. We've done another 5,800 metres of drilling for 30 odd drill holes. Many of those holes outside the resource also hit mineralisation, and we've summarised them in our previous announcement. So they include a hit of 90 metres that got 0.6 grams a tonne outside the resource. So that's a significant chunky intersection.
So what do you guys have to do to sort of tie these sort of drill holes into the main resource? Is it just more infill drilling that's required to sort of essentially extend that, or is there something else that needs to go on?
So at Sandman, we have 4 resources currently that comprises the 500,000 ounces, and currently they're all open. So we want to keep drilling those out because we think the more we drill, essentially, the larger those resources are going to expand. But recently, we've uncovered a more significant target, which is actually a deeper target underneath those known resources that we believe is a feeder. We think there's like an elephant discovery to be made that's feeding these smaller deposits at the surface. So our next round of drilling is more going to be focused on that feeder target. We call it the sleeper target because we've got the same geology as the nearby sleeper deposit. And our consultant, John Wood, actually discovered the sleeper deposit, and he's advising our team now into where that sleeper target would be located. And the most obvious place is start drilling deeper under the known small deposits.
Yeah. So the target, I mean, it's not an actual discovery yet. This is something you've identified the potential existence of via geophysics. Am I right on that?
Yeah, we've done geophysics. We've done a bunch of 3D modelling, and the 3D modelling indicates we've got these high-grade hits sitting in our surface resource, and there's no explanation of how this gold got there. So it's got to have a feeder of some sort. Whether that's economical or not is $1 million question, but that's what's never been tested. And although there's over 1,000 drill holes in our database that we inherited from Newmont, so less than 1% went deeper than 250 metres. Yet this main target is actually sitting below 250 metres. So it's essentially an untested multi-million ounce target. And that's what we're most excited about. We're also confident we can grow our oxide resource. The current 500,000 ounces is definitely growing in the right direction, but the mother lode, is where the action's at and where we're going to be targeting.
That, to me, kind of seems like a bit of a crazy oversight. I mean, if you're going to sink, 1,000+ drill holes, however many, hundreds of thousands of meters, in this case, it sounds like, wouldn't it make sense to sink 1, 2, 3 down 200, 300, 400 meters? It's
really surprising, isn't it? But I mean, even we were distracted by the on-surface gold.
Yeah.
So our first drill program, you've got 500,000 ounces, it's open. It's just so easy to keep growing that if you go along strike and down dip of it. And I feel like we also got in that trap when we got the deposit. We're like, oh, we know where to add ounces, guaranteed, resource increase, good news flow. But it's the deeper target that is higher risk, and that's been really neglected because of these distractions on surface. And we've gone through the geological model with John Wood, and basically the gold comes up through fault zones in Sandman and in Sleeper. and then it gets it accumulates when it hits a pressure release zone. So the first pressure release zone is a major geological contact between the younger volcanic rocks and the older basement rocks. That's the contact that's never been tested, yet it's the first place the gold is going to hit. Then the next pressure release point is the paleo water table, and that's where 100% of the previous exploration is focused. So we think, the best part would have been the first pressure release zone rather than the second pressure release zone.
What's the depth of the first pressure release zone, roughly?
It's from surface. The basement.
The basement, where the deeper zone.
We've got a couple of holes that pierce that geological contact, and we believe it's going to be on average between 250 and 350 meters below the surface.
So not that deep in the grand scheme of global exploration by any means.
Right. We can test it with an RC rig, which is a cheap test.
So, how much of this do you think comes down to the, doctrine of exploration in Nevada that, all the gold is in gold oxides, the first, what's the number, like 150 feet from surface or something?
We've just done Able Knoll test work that's got oxide down to 201 meters. So you say around 200 meters at our particular project. Every project's a little different.
But that's been the historic view in Nevada, right? That there's not really much worth exploring below that. And then it's kind of shifted over the last decade or so that, there's these bigger sort of feeders and bigger assets at depth.
I think the gold price is largely dictating that, though, because currently we've got gold around $1,800, whereas in many instances exploration at these projects was done when it was between $300 and $500 an ounce. So I think the gold price makes all the difference, and seeing the current gold price makes these deeper sulfide deposits economically viable, as an exploration target.
Right.
Whereas at $500, that doesn't really work.
And so it's not just the extended cost of both exploring and extracting the sulfides for people at home. It's the extended processing costs of processing and refining the sulfides, which are significantly more challenging and more expensive than the oxides.
Exactly, and real ballpark numbers, like say $1,000 an ounce is what you see commonly in the state of Nevada for that kind of gold. So obviously at gold price less than $1,000, it just, you don't really start looking for it.
You've engaged a lot with a lot of your peers and other exploration companies in Nevada, as well as sort of the majors there, obviously given the deal with Newmont. What is the view on sort of the future of gold exploration in Nevada amongst these players? Is it, it's time to go after these sulfides at depth and find these bigger things? Like, how do sort of the biggest people in this space, how are they looking at the future of gold there?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is a new frontier and a new exploration target, deeper drilling. I think we're going to see more deeper drilling and more undercover drilling. The majors are obviously looking at the juniors as well for discoveries. And the drilling providers in the state have come a long way as well. Like before, it was hard to find drillers that could reach some of the deeper targets.
Yeah.
So that's getting better and better. So I do think that these sulfide targets will become a lot more of interest globally as well. And Nevada's such a great state to work in. We've got such a supportive local government and state government, and a couple of senators that really endorse our industry.
So there's a lot of people that have looked for gold in Nevada. There's a lot of people that will look for gold in Nevada. It's, one of the most, I think it's consistently ranked if not one of the top gold exploration and mining jurisdictions on the planet. How does Gold Bull compete here? You're still a small junior. You've got a couple good assets. You're growing. How do you compete against more established players and really a history of exploration there?
Mm-hmm. So I think what sets us apart from other explorers is that we have the 500,000 ounces in the bank. That's already in resource category. We've got a market cap of less than $20 million Canadian with almost $1 billion worth of gold in the ground. So that's for us something that differentiates us. We've also got what's called a plan of operation for Sandman. It's one of the reasons why we wanted Sandman so badly from Newmont. Plan of operations is a really comprehensive environmental permitting document. It goes through hydrogeology, biology, cultural stuff. And these days to get a plan of operation in the US takes years and costs millions. So for us, we've got permission to disturb up to 500 acres at Sandman, which means we can just drill. Essentially, we want to drill and move the project forward. So for us, there's no limitation. If we get onto a target, we're going to keep drilling it. We're not going to have to stop for permits. We're not going to have to wait a couple of years for those baseline studies that have been done.
Right.
So that plan of operation for me was a big differentiator as well.
Because what often happens, right, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but in Nevada, you often are permitted for a certain number of drill pads, right?
You get 5 acres under a notice, so 5 acres of disturbance.
And so, okay, but if you've exceeded that, then it's sort of back to the drawing board, getting a new permit. So you have much more flexibility in that? Is that?
Yeah, so once you get to that 5 acres, then you have to initiate this plan of operation, this environmental impact assessment.
I see.
That takes years and costs a lot. So we've already got the permission to do 500 acres of disturbance, which is way more than we'll ever need to disturb. But 5 acres doesn't last very long when you consider the roads required to get to your pads also are eating up your 5 acres.
Yeah. And so presumably Newmont footed the bill for all that.
Thanks to Newmont. Yeah, courtesy of Newmont.
That's convenient there. Okay. Now, is there anything else that we haven't touched on today that's going on with the company that investors or potential investors should know about?
So since we last caught up, we got our Big Balds project to a point of drill readiness, and that's located next to Bald Mountain Mine, south of Elko, also in Nevada.
And Bald Mountain Mine's like a 10 million ounce deposit or something.
It's over 5, somewhere between 5 and 10, a Kinross operating asset. And it's located along strike of this mine. This mine's been drilled to death in a mountain, and then you go in a valley and you've got our project that's a long strike and never been drilled because of a bit of cover. So it's one that we're pretty excited to drill. We've already done geophysics, we've done ground magnetics, and we've reprocessed gravity data. We've got an intrusion which looks very similar to the geophysical anomaly at Bald Mountain. What we don't know is if ours is also gold bearing or not. So 8 holes is going to tell us, do we have a winner basically, or was it not associated with that mineralizing event?
And what is the timeline to be able to drill that?
We're ready to drill, so it's all fully permitted to drill. We're about to get our hands on our drill rig in late November. The plans then is to send it to Sandman. Both Sandman and Big Balds are low elevation projects, which mean we can drill 12 months a year. After it finishes our program at Sandman, we'll then send it to Big Balds. So probably late quarter 1-ish, early quarter 2, we should have an answer on Big Balds.
All right. Well, Cherie, thank you very much for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jamie.
All right, guys, and that is Gold Bull Resources, Cherie Leeden, $20 million market cap. Is that right?
Yeah, bargain.
All right. Where can people find more?
Goldbull.ca.
All right. Thanks, Cherie.
Thanks, Jamie.